You have 72 hours to find another option.
He said it like he was reading a weather report. Like he hadn't just proposed marriage to a woman he'd met 4 minutes ago. Like 32 floors of glass and silence were a perfectly normal place to dismantle someone's life. Ava Brooks did not move. She stood in the center of Kang Joon-ho's office, carry-on still on her shoulder, and thought, with the calm that comes right before real panic, that her father had managed, even in death, to absolutely ruin her life. "Say that again," she said. "Which part?" "The part where you think I'm going to marry you." Joon-ho folded his hands on the desk. Early 30s, with a face that would have been handsome if it weren't so deliberately blank. Like someone had taken a very good-looking man and edited out everything human. "The debt your father accumulated over 6 years totals $412,000, he said. "Under Korean inheritance law, you assumed that liability the moment you accepted the estate transfer. I accepted a restaurant. You accepted everything attached to it." Ava set her bag down, because she needed both hands free to think. "I'm a pastry cook from Atlanta. I make $41,000 a year. You know that, since you know everything else about me. So you already know I can't pay you back." "Yes. So what does marrying you actually get you?" Something shifted behind his eyes, like a door opening 1 inch and then closing again. 2 years. Legal marriage. Public appearances when required. The full debt disappears. You keep the restaurant, free and clear, and receive a monthly stipend. And when 2 years is up, clean divorce. You walk away with whatever you've saved and no debt. Ava looked at him for a long time. "My father came to see you before he died," she said. "More than once. I found his visitor logs. It wasn't a question. She'd found the notebook in his office. Her father had always written down every appointment. She'd taken it when she left. Joon-ho didn't confirm it, didn't deny it either. 72 hours, he said. "If you find another solution, I will honor it. Call my attorney." He slid a card across the desk. She picked it up. "And if I just leave, get on a plane tonight. The debt follows you. Internationally. Legally. Leaving Seoul doesn't end this." She put the card in her pocket. "What did my father owe you?" she said at the door. "Beyond the money." Silence. 72 hours, he said. She spent the first 12 making phone calls. 3 numbers from her father's phone. The first was disconnected. The second rang out. The third picked up, and when she said Daniel Brooks, the man went quiet before saying, flatly, "I don't know anything about that," and hanging up. Like he'd been warned. She called a lawyer through the embassy website, Korean-American cross-border estate disputes. $300. Last credit card. She didn't blink. "The debt is real," Gloria told her. "The inheritance transfer is legal. You signed the papers." "I signed papers for a restaurant. The debt was attached to it. One document, Miss Brooks. Page 7, paragraph 4. Anything I can do?" "Not quickly. 2 to 4 years to contest. You need money, you don't have to fight money you owe." "Perfect," Ava said. "That's genuinely perfect." She hung up and let herself feel it for exactly 5 minutes. The loneliness of being in a foreign country with no one to call. The grief she hadn't finished. The anger at a man no longer alive to receive it. 5 minutes. Then she stood up and kept moving because that was the only thing she knew how to do. On the second day, she went back to the restaurant. Daniel's was on a narrow street in Mapo-gu, tucked between a convenience store and a dry cleaner. Small, tired, American-Korean fusion. Bulgogi sliders. Kimchi grilled cheese. Seoul-style biscuits and gravy. She swept the floor. Stood in the kitchen looking at equipment organized with a precision that surprised her until she remembered. Meticulous with objects. Careless with people. In the back office, she found a shelf of American cookbooks. On the bottom shelf, a photograph tucked inside a copy of Joy of Cooking. Ava, maybe 7 years old, both hands around a mixing bowl, grinning so wide her eyes had shut. Her father behind her, laughing, his hand on her shoulder. Their old kitchen indicator. She sat down on the dusty floor and held it. He had carried this photograph across an ocean. Had borrowed $400,000 from a crime family and never called her once. But he had kept this. 30 years of knowing her father wasn't enough, and 12 days of missing him anyway. Those two things sat in her chest like stones that didn't belong together. She put the photograph in her bag. Called Attorney Park. "I need the full loan documents. Every page. Tonight. They arrived by messenger at 8 p.m. She read every word twice. Then she called Park back. Section 9, Clause 3. The secondary collateral. What is it? Certain documentation. Materials your father agreed to surrender upon default. What materials? That I was not given access to. Her father hadn't just borrowed money. He had promised something specific, valuable enough to anchor a $400,000 debt. Is there anything in the estate not listed in the initial inventory? Storage unit, safe deposit box, anything. A pause. A storage unit in Yongsan. He was paying rental monthly until last month. I didn't think it was relevant. I need the address. Miss Brooks, I'd advise. The address, please. She called Joon-ho at 11 that night. Miss Brooks. No surprise. Like he'd been expecting her. I'm not agreeing to anything yet, she said. But I have questions. Real ones. And I need honest answers before I make any decision. A silence. The kind that felt like a man choosing something. Come to the office tomorrow. 8 a.m. 7:30. I want to catch you before you've had time to prepare. The silence that followed was different. Smaller. Like she'd landed somewhere unexpected. 7:30, he said, and hung up. Ava set the phone down and looked at the photograph of herself at 7 years old, grinning into a mixing bowl, her father's hand steady on her shoulder. She missed him with a ferocity that surprised her. Not the man he'd been in the last 9 years, the absence. The version that had laughed in that kitchen. The one that might have, someday, explained himself. That version was gone now. What was left was a restaurant, a debt, and a man on the 32nd floor who knew more about her father's last years than she did. What did you do, Dad? She said quietly. Seoul glittered through the window, patient and enormous, keeping every single one of its secrets. Before you go on, if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now. Because what Ava is about to walk into at 7:30 in the morning is going to change everything. And you do not want to miss the moment it all begins to unravel. She was there at 7:25. Small things matter when you have no leverage. Arriving early was the only move she had, and she intended to make it count. The receptionist looked up when Ava walked in, did the quick assessment that people always did, then smoothed her expression into professionalism. Miss Brooks, you're expected. Which meant he'd anticipated her arriving early. She rode the elevator to the 32nd floor and refused to be impressed by any of it. Joon-ho was already at his desk. Black coffee, no food, a document open in front of him. Not performing readiness. Simply ready, the way the building was simply tall. Sit down, he said. This time she sat. She had questions, not a point of proof. My father promised you something beyond money, she said. Section 9 of the loan documents. What was it? He looked at her steadily. You read carefully. I read everything. What did he promise? Information, Joon-ho said. Your father had access to business records belonging to a rival organization operating out of Incheon. He offered those records as collateral in exchange for the initial loan. And he never delivered. No. Do you know why? He got scared, Joon-ho said. He found what he'd promised me, and then realized the people it incriminated were dangerous enough that handing it over would make him a target. So he hid it and waited for a way out that never came. And then he died. The words landed between them with more weight than she intended. She watched him absorb them, the slight shift in his jaw, something that might have been guilt if she let herself read it that way. Yes, he said. And then he died. She looked at him. You feel responsible for that. It wasn't a question. It was something she saw. He met her gaze and said nothing, which was the most honest answer he could have given. She let sit. Then, you think I know where what he hid is. I think your father made arrangements in case something happened to him. He was methodical. He wouldn't have left something that important without a path back to it. He didn't contact me for 9 years, she said. That doesn't mean he didn't prepare. She thought about the storage unit in Yongsan. She had not told anyone. What does the marriage actually accomplish? She said. Be specific. My mother, he said, and something shifted in his voice. Not softness, more like the acknowledgement of a structural problem he'd learned to live around, is negotiating an arranged alliance with the Incheon group. If I'm already legally married, that arrangement becomes impossible. So you need a wife to block a different marriage. I need time, he said. The marriage buys it. And you chose the daughter of the man who owed you. The daughter of the man who may have what I need, he said. It's practical. It's a lot, she said. He almost smiled. It didn't reach his eyes, but it reached something near them. They talked for 90 minutes. She learned things, not everything, but enough to reshape what she was standing inside of. The Kang family operated in the space between legitimate business and something larger. The rival organization controlled Incheon port terminals, and whoever controlled those terminals controlled the movement of things never listed on any manifest. Her father had been gathering documentation on that network, had promised it as collateral, had stopped when delivering it became more dangerous than owing it. You made a mistake, she said, before he died. Something that exposed him. Joon-ho was quiet for a moment. A real quiet, not strategic. I used a contact he'd given me to send a message to the Incheon group. It revealed that I had a source inside their network. They started searching for that source. My father. Yes. You put him at risk. Not intentionally, but effectively. He held her gaze. Yes. The word dropped into the room and stayed there. She looked at him and saw, for a fraction of a second, the thing underneath the control. Not remorse performed. Remorse carried quietly, for a long time, the way people carry things they can't put down. He hid the materials to keep them safe, she said, not to withhold them permanently. He was waiting until he could trust the situation, or until someone he trusted could use them. Ava. It was the first time he'd used her name. They both noticed it. The conditions will be with your attorney this afternoon, she said. 5 pages. Read all of them. She stood up, picked up her bag. Miss Brooks, he said. She stopped. Whatever he left you, he said. Don't go alone. She turned just enough to look at him over her shoulder. And for just a moment she saw it again. The thing beneath the office, the 32 floors, the $400,000, and all the leverage in the world. Concern. Simple and unperformed. I'll take that under advisement, she said. The conditions she gave his attorney that afternoon were exactly 5 pages. Legal marriage with a mutual dissolution clause at 24 months. Separate bank accounts. No business documents signed without 72 hours of independent review. No restrictions on her movements. No reproductive pressure of any kind. She included this because it was better to be explicit about everything. In Clause 4C, full access to all documentation pertaining to the original loan, including secondary collateral arrangements, within 60 days of marriage commencement. She wanted to understand the full shape of what she was standing inside. Joon-ho called that evening. Clause 3, acceptable. Clause 5, modified to 72 hours for documents over 40 pages. Fine. Clause 4C is aggressive. It's reasonable. It's also a potential security risk. To both of us. Then we both have something to protect, she said. Which makes us more equal than you assumed. A silence that felt like recalibration. The revised contract will arrive tomorrow morning, he said. My attorney will have it reviewed by afternoon. Miss Brooks. Yes. Why are you staying? He said. You're smart enough to understand the risk. You could go home and start over. She looked at the photograph on the nightstand. The little girl in the kitchen. The hand on her shoulder. My father spent 6 years here, she said. Built something here. He promised you something and didn't deliver and then died. I don't know yet whether he was protecting me or protecting himself or just afraid. I can't go home without knowing which one. A pause. Long enough that she thought the line had dropped. Get some sleep, he said finally. Tomorrow will be complicated. She stayed at the window long after he hung up, watching the Han River move through the city. She was lonely in the way you are when you are in the middle of something enormous, and there is no one who fully understands the particular shape of your situation. But somewhere in a building across this city, she suspected there was a man who came close. Drop it in the comments. Do you think Ava's father was protecting her, or was he using her? The wedding was on a Tuesday, not a Saturday with flowers and a reception. A Tuesday, at 10 a.m., in a district office in Seoul, with Attorney Park and Tae-hyun as witnesses and a registrar who had processed thousands of these and would process thousands more. Ava wore a cream blouse and dark trousers she bought the day before because she refused to get married in the clothes she'd packed to collect the dead man's belongings. She was about to get married. To a stranger. In a country where she didn't speak the language. To erase a debt her absent father had created. She said to her reflection, "You are going to be okay." She didn't entirely believe it. But sometimes you say a thing enough times until your body decides to act like it's true. Joon-ho wore a dark suit. When she walked in and he turned to look at her, something moved in his expression. Brief. Real. He controlled it almost immediately, which made it more significant than if he'd let it show. They signed the papers. The registrar stamped something. Tae-hyun stood against the wall, expression neutral, filing everything away for later use. Congratulations, the registrar said, in Korean. Joon-ho translated. Tell her thank you, Ava said. Then they walked out into the Tuesday morning and stood on the steps and did not speak for almost a full minute. She was married, standing next to her husband on the steps of a government building in Seoul, barely knowing his last name. So, she said finally. The car is waiting, he said. And then, very quietly, are you all right? He was looking straight ahead, at anything that wasn't her face. Ask me in a week, she said. He nodded. And that was all. But it was something. The house was off of Gujong, behind a gate and a stone path lined with manicured trees. Large but not excessive. The housekeeper was Mrs. O, a woman in her 60s, who bowed, spoke to Joon-ho in quick Korean, then turned to Ava with a small, careful smile. She says welcome, Joon-ho said. I understood Oseo, Ava said. I've been studying. Mrs. O blinked. Then her smile widened into the real kind. Joon-ho said nothing, but she caught the slight recalibration in him. Her room was on the east side, separated from his by a sitting room and a door that locked from both sides. Clause 7, which she was grateful for now that she was standing in an actual house with an actual man she had actually married 3 hours ago. The room was spare and clean. Good light. A window over a quiet garden. She sat on the edge of the bed. She had signed her name to this. It was her life for 2 years, and she could fall apart about it, or she could figure out who this man was and what her father had gotten her into, and whether there was a way through all of it that left her intact. She chose the second one. She always chose the second one. She was beginning to understand both her greatest strength and the loneliest thing about her. Dinner was at 7. They sat across from each other at one end of a long table. A stage set for a relationship neither of them was performing yet. Mrs. O had made doenjang jjigae, japchae, and rice. When Ava said, slowly and badly, Gamis Emanida, Mrs. O pressed her hand against Ava's shoulder and said something soft. Joon-ho picked up his chopsticks. She said, your pronunciation is terrible, but your sincerity makes up for it. That's fair. He almost smiled, a hairline crack in the surface of him. They ate in silence, not the comfortable kind. Two people sitting with the strangeness of their situation, not yet sure if they were allowed to say so. Rules, he said eventually. My business operations are not your concern. No questions about meetings, contacts, or transactions. If you see or hear something you don't understand, you come to me first. What if you're not reachable? I'm always reachable. Are you going to tell me what I might stumble into before I stumble into it? Or is this a find-out-as-you-go situation? The second one, mostly. Reassuring. She picked up her chopsticks. What do I get besides a clear debt and a stipend? What do you want? She hadn't expected a real question. Honesty, she said. When it counts. He held her gaze. Something passed between them. Not warmth exactly, but the very first thread of something. When it counts, he agreed. She felt it the way you feel the first day the temperature shifts and realize, without meaning to, that the season has changed. The surveillance she discovered on the third day, cameras in every common area. She found a monitoring station off the main corridor, then found Tae-hyun near the front entrance. The cameras. Am I being watched specifically, or is this standard security? Standard. I'm not going to pretend I don't notice things, she told him. I won't perform being someone I'm not here. I'll do what's needed in public. But in here, I'm just a person. Noted. Is that all I'm getting? For now. Then, the camera covering the East Garden has a 10-second lag. If you want somewhere to think without being observed in real time. She walked away and added him to the growing list of things in this house that were more complicated than they appeared. On the 5th day, Madame Khan arrived. Ava heard her before she saw her. A voice in the entrance hall, low, precise, the cadence of someone who had never needed to raise her voice to be obeyed. She was elegant in the way expensive, disciplined women are elegant. Silk and charcoal gray. Perfect posture. She looked at Ava with the expression of a woman encountering something she had not approved and did not intend to accept. "So," she said, in flawless cold English, "you're the American, Ava Brooks. It's nice to meet you." "Is it?" A verdict, not a question. "Your father was a man of very poor decisions." "He was," Ava said. "We had that in common for a while. I've been working on it." Something moved in Madame Kang's expression. She had aimed, and it had stepped sideways. "My son makes decisions for reasons I sometimes learn later. I accept this about him." Her eyes were precise as a blade. "I do not have to accept you." "No," Ava said. "You don't. You're not frightened of me." "I'm a little," Ava said. "But I'm more exhausted than frightened. It's been a very long few weeks." Madame Kang turned to Joon-ho and spoke in Korean. He answered, short and even. Then she moved past Ava, and the room rearranged itself around her absence like water, closing over a stone. What did she say? Joon-ho came to stand beside her, close enough that she was aware of him. She said, "You have your father's eyes, and his stubbornness." "And what did you say?" "I said yes. Both parts." He held her gaze a beat longer than necessary, then walked away. Ava stood in the entrance hall and understood, without flinching, that this house was a war that had been running long before she arrived. And somewhere in the last 5 days, without quite deciding to, she had started to pick a side. 3 weeks in, Ava built herself a routine. Routines were how she survived things. She had learned this at 19, when her father dissolved out of her life. At 23, when a kitchen she'd been loyal to closed without warning. And at 26, when she had to accept that some people leave, and it is simply a thing that happens. Up at 6, 2 laps around the garden path. Shower. Eat. 1 hour with the Korean language app she'd downloaded the day she arrived in Seoul. Mrs. O had noticed the app. She started leaving Korean out where Ava might pick it up. Not teaching. Exactly. Just offering. "You're getting better," Mrs. O told her one morning, over tea she'd made without being asked. "Still very bad," Ava said in Korean. Mrs. O waved her hand. "Bad is how everything starts." 12 words. She carried it longer than 12 words deserved. Joon-ho was rarely home before 9. What surprised her was the consistency. He always came back. She'd half expected him to treat the house as a stage set. But he came home every night, ate whatever Mrs. O had left, and sometimes settled in the sitting room long enough that Ava, reading on the other end of the sofa, could feel the pressure of someone choosing not to speak. She didn't push. On the 4th week, she broke the silence first. "You went to see my father before he died," she said, not looking up from her book. "At least 3 times in his last 8 months. I found his appointment log." Joon-ho set down his phone. "Yes. What did you talk about?" "Business." "That's not an answer." He looked at the wall. He wanted more time to renegotiate what he owed. "And you gave it to him." 3 times, he said. He used every extension to continue not delivering what he'd promised. Because he was scared. Because he'd gotten over his head, Joon-ho said. Scared is manageable. Over your head means you've stopped thinking strategically and started thinking about how to survive the next 24 hours. She looked at him now. Is that what happened to him? I think he found what he'd promised me and realized the people it incriminated were dangerous enough that handing it over would make him a target. So he hid it and waited for a way out that never came. And then he died, she said, conveniently. His cardiac event was confirmed by 3 independent physicians. I know. I read the report. She paused. I'm not saying it wasn't natural. I'm saying the timing is worth noting. He didn't argue, which told her everything about whether he had the same thought. He was protecting you, Joon-ho said. Whatever he hid, I believe he left it where you could find it. Some part of him knew you'd come. The tightness in her chest was immediate and inconvenient. That's generous, for a man who didn't call me for 9 years. Maybe, he said, but he kept your photograph on his shelf. She looked at him sharply. You saw that. I went to the restaurant after he died. I was looking for the documentation. I found a photograph instead. I left it where it was. She looked at her book. She was not reading it. Why are you telling me this? She said. Because you deserve to know that he thought about you, even if he was bad at showing it. She kept her face composed and felt the specific ache of a wound managing itself for 9 years, just now touched, gently, by someone unexpected. She didn't say anything. He didn't either, but he didn't move to the other end of the sofa, and she didn't close the space between them, and the evening settled differently than all the evenings before it. The first public appearance was a charity gala in Cheongdam. The brief arrived 24 hours before. Attendees, affiliations, subjects to avoid. And a note at the bottom: be warm. Be credible. Don't explain. She bought a dress because she had not packed for Gangnam charity galas. She stood in front of her mirror, a black woman from Atlanta, in a Seoul mansion, about to perform a marriage to a crime heir, and felt the full absurdity of her life. Then she put on her earrings and went downstairs. Joon-ho was in the entrance hall. He turned when he heard her on the stairs, and she saw the thing that moved in his face before he controlled it. It wasn't calculation. Something shifted behind his eyes that he did not quite manage to hide. "You'll do," he said. "Flattering," she said. He stopped. "You look appropriate." "You almost said something else," she said. He held out his arm. "Shall we?" She took it and felt him take a slow breath, like a man steadying something. At the gala, he introduced her every time the same way. "My wife, Ava." No explanation, no apology, just the weight of it, stated as fact. She watched the reactions, the assessments, the smiles that held a half-second too long. Through all of it, she felt Joon-ho beside her, the way he moved closer when a conversation got tense, his hand finding the small of her back when she needed to feel anchored. She wasn't sure he knew he was doing it. Later, by the windows, he appeared at her elbow with sparkling water. "Lee Won-soo is watching you," he said, low and even. Second in from the left at the bar. Gray suit. He was a business associate of your father's. She didn't look immediately. "Should I know that name?" "Remember it. He called my attorney the day after your father died, asking about the estate." She kept her face still. "And you're telling me this now, in a room full of people, because he's watching to see if you recognize him. I want him to see that you don't." "Joon-ho." She said his name the way you say something you've been avoiding saying, and they both heard it. "What is he?" He looked out the city. "That," he said quietly, "is exactly what your father's documentation would tell us." They stood there in the noise and light of the gala, aware of his arm near hers, the warmth of him through his jacket, the fact that this was not the detached transaction she'd signed up for anymore. Not tonight. Tonight she would keep her face still and remember the name Lee Won-soo. But the question was forming, quietly, underneath everything else. In the car on the way home, she was quiet for a while. Then, "You used me tonight. I showed you something useful," he said, "by putting me in front of a man who may have been involved in my father's death. We don't know that. We're not ruling it out either." She turned to look at him. "If you're going to put me in rooms with dangerous people, I need to know why before I'm in the room. Not during. Not after." He turned from the window, looked at her. Not the calculation, something underneath it. "That's fair," he said. She hadn't expected that. The directness of it. The simplicity. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. They drove the rest of the way in silence. But it was a different silence. Something had shifted between them tonight in a way that neither of them had planned for, and both of them knew it, and neither of them was ready to say so. She found the ledger on a Wednesday. The storage unit in Yongsan was the size of a large closet. Metal shelving, cardboard boxes, the accumulated material of a man quietly closing off pieces of his life. She had the key from Attorney Park. She'd waited almost 3 weeks to come, and she stood outside the metal door for a full minute before she used it. Some part of her knew that opening it meant something. Not just about the investigation. About her father. About the story she'd been telling herself for 9 years about who he was. She opened it. The boxes were labeled in her father's handwriting, which hit her somewhere she hadn't expected. Just his handwriting. Just the ordinary evidence of a man who had existed, who had touched things, who had labeled boxes like everyone else. She opened personal first, because it was the one she was afraid of. Old photographs. Her mother, young and laughing. Ava at various ages, most pulled from social media and printed out, which meant he had been watching her life from a distance, had looked at her photographs on a screen somewhere in Seoul, and missed her in whatever way men who have failed their children miss them. Report cards she hadn't known he'd kept. A birthday card she'd sent at 15, before the silence got permanent, with a sunflower on the front. She held the birthday card for a long time. She thought about being 15 and picking out that card and wondering if he'd receive it. She thought about being 25 and deciding definitively that she didn't care anymore. She thought about all the years between 15 and now, and what they had cost both of them, and whether any of it had been worth it. She put it back, kept going. The ledger was at the bottom of the box marked kitchen supplies, too. A slim, cloth-covered notebook, filled with her father's careful handwriting. Dates, names, figures, cargo terminal codes, routing numbers, Korean characters she couldn't read alongside dollar amounts she could. Near the back, a name underlined twice, Lee Won-soo. And on the last page, in English, they know what I have. Do not trust JH to protect this. Keep separate. Ava will know what to do. She read it 4 times. Ava will know what to do. He hadn't spoken to her in 9 years. She was a pastry cook from Atlanta who had arrived in Seoul with $11 and a suitcase. She sat in the storage unit and felt the grief and the anger, and underneath both of them something more complicated, something that felt like being chosen, which was the thing she had stopped letting herself want from him a very long time ago. "Dad," she said to the empty room, "I really don't know what to do." But even as she said it, she was photographing every page. She did not tell Joon-ho that night. Do not trust JH. She needed to understand what had changed before she handed him something her father had died protecting. She sat in the East Garden in the 10-second lag window Tae-hyun had quietly given her, and she thought about the timeline, about the moment the ledger entries changed, about what her father had seen that had made him afraid. The answer came from Mrs. O. 2 days later, in the kitchen, in the unhurried way that Mrs. O offered things, not as information, just as truth that happened to be in the room. In mixed Korean and careful English, she described a meeting 2 years ago. Men through the back entrance, after dark, and Joon-ho arguing with them, loudly enough that she'd heard it from the kitchen. Who were they? Ava asked. Mrs. O looked at her pot, said a word Ava typed into her phone. Incheon. At the end of the argument, something had been agreed that he had not wanted to agree to. He was scared, Ava said. Mrs. O shook her head. Then, in careful English, not scared. Trap. Ava looked at her for a long moment. Like me, she said softly. Mrs. O met her eyes, put her hand over Ava's on the counter, and said nothing, which was the kindest thing she could have done. She confronted him that night. He was in his study. She knocked. He said, "Come in," expecting Tae-hyun. When he saw her face, he set down his pen. "You made an agreement with the Incheon group 2 years ago," she said. "Something private. Something you didn't choose willingly." Very still. "Is it wrong?" she said. "No." She came further in. "My father stopped trusting you around the same time. The ledger entries change, the handwriting, the frequency, everything. He kept gathering information, but stopped delivering it, because something shifted in how he saw you." She held his gaze. What was the agreement? He leaned back, looked at the ceiling briefly, a gesture she hadn't seen from him before. A man measuring how much truth he can live with saying. "They had leverage over my family," he said. "Evidence of transactions that wouldn't survive legal scrutiny. They proposed a partnership heavily weighted toward them. And you agreed. Temporarily. While I found a way out. Your father's documentation was supposed to be that way out. But he stopped trusting you because you used one of his contacts." He looked at her. "I sent a message to the Incheon group through someone inside their network. Someone your father had identified. It was strategic. It revealed that I had a source. They started searching and found my father. They couldn't prove it, but the suspicion was enough. He knew it. He stopped and started hiding. You exposed him," she said. "Not intentionally, but effectively." He held her gaze. "Yes." She reached in her bag and set the ledger on his desk. He looked at it, did not reach for it, and she saw something cross his face. Not relief, not strategy. Something heavier. Something that looked a great deal like the weight of everything this small notebook represented. "This can end the hold they have over your family," she said. "Yes, and it puts you directly in danger the moment anyone knows it exists." "I know, Ava." The way he said her name now was different from the first time in the office. It had acquired something over the weeks, a weight, a care. "I made one mistake that put your father at risk. I am not willing to make another one." She looked at him across the desk and felt the truth of that, not just as a statement of strategy, as something he meant in his body, in the part of him that existed underneath the calculation. "The copies are already made," she said. "Encrypted. Cloud account. Instructions to release to a journalist contact in Seoul if either of us goes unreachable for 72 hours. He stared at her. Your father, he said finally, was right about you. She held his gaze. Then let's not waste it. Everything changed after the ledger. Not loudly. Not with a scene. Change happened in the margins of this house. Joon-ho started coming home at 7 instead of 9, briefed her on meetings before he left each morning, and when Taehyun updated security protocols, he included her without being asked to. But the change was also something smaller and more dangerous. It was the way Joon-ho had started looking at her when he didn't think she was watching. The way he stood slightly closer than the contract required. The way silence between them could now carry something warm instead of just distance. She was careful about all of it. The mistake of wanting something from a person before she knew if they were safe. She had learned that lesson at 19 and had not unlearned it since. But alone in the early mornings, she was honest about what her chest did when she heard him come home. That she had started cooking things she knew he liked. That the house felt different on the rare nights he wasn't in it. She did nothing about any of it. Lee Won-soo moved first. He called Attorney Park, her attorney, not Joon-ho's, and proposed a meeting. Just a conversation, he said, about her father. She told Joon-ho immediately. He went very still. Don't meet with him. I wasn't planning to without discussing it with you first. She paused. But I think I should go. He's moving because something spooked him. If he's scared enough to reach out directly, he might say something useful. Ava, I'll carry a recording device. Taehyun stays in the building. But I should go. She could see the conflict, the strategic mind that recognized the logic, and the part that did not want her in a room with Lee Won-soo. All right, he said. But Taehyun stays within line of sight. They met at a hotel restaurant in Itaewon, neutral ground, public. He had the ease of a man used to being underestimated, which meant he'd spent decades turning that into an advantage. He smiled and spoke in English. Miss Brooks, or Mrs. Kang now, I suppose. Ava is fine, she said. He glanced at the empty chair. Your husband didn't join you. He respects my independence, she said pleasantly. Your father was a good man, Lee said. You called as a state attorney the morning after he died, she said. What? We had mutual business interests. Certain shared records. I wanted to ensure they were handled appropriately. Do you know where they are? He said. No, she said. He believed her. Good. That meant he didn't know about the storage unit. She let him make his offer, the documentation in exchange for erasing the debt entirely. Walking away free, clean, no contract, no gong-nom. She said she needed time to think. She drove home with the recording device warm in her pocket. She told Joon-ho everything in the study. He listened without moving. When she finished, the room was very quiet. He killed your father, he said. I think so. I can't prove it. If you give him the ledger, you become the only person who can connect him to your father's death. His voice was controlled, but she had learned to hear the difference between control as habit and control as effort. This was effort. You don't walk away. You become a problem he needs to eliminate. I know, she said. He stood up and walked to the window. I should have told you about Lee weeks ago, he said. I was managing the information instead of sharing it. And that was the same mistake I made 2 years ago. He stopped. Joon-ho. He turned. She was closer than she'd meant to get. They were standing very close in the low light of his study, and she looked at him, not at the control or the strategy, and saw the man underneath. Tired. Carrying something heavy for a long time. Stop managing me, she said. Just stop. Tell me things when they matter. I'm not going to break. I know you're not, he said. His voice was low. That's not what I'm afraid of. And then he reached up and touched her face. Just his fingertips against her cheekbone, like he had run out of reasons not to. And then he kissed her. It was a quiet thing, his mouth against hers, brief and careful, the kind of kiss that asks a question instead of making a statement. She felt it in the ache of someone guarded for a long time, touched somewhere they forgot was there. He pulled back. That wasn't in the contract, she said. Her voice was not entirely steady. No, he said. It wasn't. We should make a plan, she said. For Lee. Yes, he said. We should. He stepped back. She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding, and the room rearranged itself into something that resembled normal. But it was not normal, and they both knew it. The plan was precise. Prosecutor Yoon Seo-jin. 3 years building a case against Incheon for corruption. Taehyun had a contact close to her team. We send encrypted cloud copies through the contact, with verification that originals exist, Joon-ho said, at the dining room table, Taehyun present, the ledger between them. She gets enough to move before we're named as the source. And once she's in motion, Lee can't pull anything overt without becoming the story himself, Ava said. Correct. The Incheon leverage over my family is already in attorney conversations. Mutually assured. They know it. You've been working on this for months, she said. The ledger was the piece I was missing, he said. He looked at her. The piece your father was supposed to deliver. And now you have it. Because of you, he said. Simply. Directly. And this time she let herself receive it. Not just as a fact, but as the thing it was. They move on a Thursday. By 4 in the afternoon, there was movement in the legal machinery. Joon-ho's phone went 3 times in 20 minutes. Ava sat with Mrs. Overtek-Baki and felt the anxiety of someone who has set something enormous in motion and now has to wait. Lee moved faster than expected. 2 men at the gate at 7. Turned away cleanly. But the message was clear. He knew. Joon-ho came into the kitchen with that stillness he had when something was critical. She could see the conflict, the calculation, and the other thing growing since the study, since his fingertips against her cheek. Change of timeline, he said. How fast? Tonight. Safe house in Hannum. His voice was even. I need you to go. You said that before. I didn't go. This is not the same. Then work with me, she said. Not around me. In this house. Together. Or not all. He closed his eyes for just a moment. You are, he said, the most difficult person I have ever negotiated with. Good, she said. Because I'm also the most useful. He opened his eyes. And in spite of everything, the gate, the men, the risk, something almost like a smile crossed his face. Yes, he said. You are. If you've made it this far, now is the perfect time to subscribe if you haven't. Because what's coming in the last batch is the part this entire story has been building toward. The night moved in small events. Taehyun at the gate. Joon-ho on calls. Door closed. Ava on the sitting room sofa with the ledger photographs open on her laptop, cross-referencing entries against the terminal network map Joon-ho had shown her because she needed to be useful, and this was what useful looked like. At midnight, he came in and sat on the sofa. Not his end. In the middle. Close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Close enough that when he leaned back and let his head rest briefly against the sofa, she could see the exhaustion in his face. Real exhaustion. The kind he'd been holding back for weeks. The prosecutor filed the provisional order at 11:30, he said. Lee can't move assets or access certain communications without triggering automatic review. That's good. That's good, he confirmed. They sat in the quiet. Outside, the garden was dark. The city hummed beyond it. My mother called, he said. She was unexpectedly calm. She understands leverage, Ava said. She does. She also said, and I won't be exact, that you have your father's stubbornness, and it is apparently not entirely a bad quality. That's the closest to a compliment I'm getting from her for a while, isn't it? Several months, minimum. She laughed. Quiet, real, the kind that rises from somewhere low when you are exhausted and the worst is almost over and someone says exactly the right thing. He laughed too, briefly, quietly, and it was the same as the first time she'd heard it. A good sound, unguarded, the sound of him without any of the architecture. She looked at him. He was already looking at her. They were close on the sofa in a way that had happened gradually over weeks and was now simply where they sat. And she felt it, the pull of it, the specific gravity of 2 people who have been through something together and come out the other side and are sitting in the aftermath of it, tired and honest and close. After a moment, his hand found hers on the sofa cushion. Just his hand over hers, warm and steady, the way someone holds something they're trying not to drop. She turned her hand over, let her fingers close around his. They sat like that for a long time, saying nothing, while the city held its breath outside. At 2 a.m., Taehyun knocked. It's done, he said. They looked up. Lee's attorney contacted ours 20 minutes ago. They want to discuss cooperation terms. He blinked, Ava said. He blinked, Taehyun confirmed, and left. Joon-ho turned to look at her, and she saw everything in his face that he had been carrying quietly for 6 weeks. The relief, the exhaustion, and underneath both of them something that had no name yet, but that she recognized because she felt it too. We did that, she said. You did that, he said. I had a strategy. You had the courage to execute it. We, she said firmly. He looked at her for a moment. Then the weeks that followed were quieter. The prosecutor expanded the filing. Lee's attorney continued negotiating, which meant Lee was cornered and knew it. The Incheon leverage dissolved in a series of attorney conversations that Joon-ho described as professionally civilized and mutually humiliating. Madam Kang's arranged marriage proposal disappeared without a word spoken about it. Ava went back to the restaurant. Part-time staff member Park Jo-won had been keeping it running since her father's death. For years on the job, knew every regular, had simply kept showing up because no one told him not to. He handed her a coffee and walked her through the kitchen and said in careful English, "Your father talked about you. Said you could bake anything." She held the cup. "He said that. Many times. He said someday you would come and make the menu better." She stood in his kitchen and felt the grief and the anger, and underneath both of them, something she hadn't been expecting. Something that felt tentatively and incompletely like peace. Not closure. She was not naive enough to call it closure. But the beginning of a decision to stop being defined by what he hadn't done and start asking what she wanted to build instead. She had a restaurant. She had a city she was learning. She had a house that had started to feel, in the quiet mornings and the late evenings, like something she might want to stay inside. She had a man who had kissed her like a question and was waiting, patiently, without pressure, with the self-possession of someone who has decided something and is content to let it arrive, for her answer. On a Sunday 6 weeks after the ledger, Joon-ho found her in the kitchen at 7 in the morning. She was making biscuits, her grandmother's recipe, proper ones. Mrs. O was watching with the expression of a woman committing a technique to permanent memory. He stood in the doorway. She could feel him there before she heard him, which was something she had stopped trying to explain. "You cook when you're processing something," he said. "I cook all the time," she said. "I just also process at the same time." He came in and sat at the counter, close enough to talk, close enough that she was aware of every inch between them. "The contract has 14 months remaining," he said. "I want to be clear that nothing that's happened changes the terms. You can still walk at the end of it. Restaurant, stipend, everything agreed." She looked up at him. "I know," she said. "Why are you telling me that?" He held her gaze. There was something in his face she had not seen before, or rather, something she had seen building for weeks and was now fully present. Something careful and exposed. Something that a man like him must have had to work very hard to let out. "Because I want you to make whatever decision you make with complete freedom," he said. "Not because of a contract, not because of a debt, because you choose to." She put down the pastry cutter. She looked at him across the counter. This man she had married on a Tuesday in a government office, who had asked for her trust and not broken it, who had laughed quietly at 2 a.m. when the worst was over, who had held her hand on the sofa without making it into something she had to respond to, who was sitting in her kitchen on a Sunday morning telling her that her choice was hers. "Seoul-style biscuits and gravy," she said. He blinked. "What?" "My father's menu," she said. "I've been thinking about it. It's a good idea. The execution just needs work. I want to reopen the restaurant." She paused. "I want to reopen it and make it something real. Something mine. Here." He was very still. "Here," he said. "Seoul," she said. "Here." The words sat between them, carrying everything they hadn't said yet. 14 months is a long time," she said. "A lot can change." "Yes," he said. His voice had gone quiet. "It can." She picked up the pastry cutter. The oven ticked. The kitchen smelled like butter and flour and something beginning. "Ask me again," she said. "In 14 months. When the contract is done. Ask me again what I want." He looked at her for a long moment. "I will," he said, and she believed him completely. Then Tae-hyun walked in. His face was wrong. She knew it immediately. In 6 weeks, she had learned to read him like weather. And this was a storm. "What is it?" Joon-ho said. Tae-hyun held out his phone. Joon-ho looked at the screen. She watched something cross his face. Quick, controlled, then gone. He stood up from the counter. "Lee withdrew the cooperation agreement," Tae-hyun said. "An hour ago." "What?" Ava said. "He met last night with the prosecutor," Joon-ho said, reading the phone. "Not Yoon Seo-jin. Someone else. He has someone inside the office," Ava said. "Yes." And that person told him who provided the initial tip to Yoon's team. He set the phone down. "He knows it was you." The kitchen went very quiet. Joon-ho came around the counter. He stood in front of her the way he had stood in the study that night. Close, without pretense, without the distance that used to live between them like furniture. "We need to move you tonight," he said. "You said that before." I stayed. "This is not the same." His voice was low and contained, and underneath it something urgent that had nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with her. "He has someone inside the prosecution. He knows your name. He knows what you did." He looked at her, really looked at her, the way he'd been looking at her for weeks now, the way that meant she was no longer a variable, no longer a piece, but a person he had let himself care about against every instinct he'd been trained to have. "I cannot protect you if you stay here tonight, and I need you safe. Not because of the contract. Because—" He stopped. She waited. "Because," he said, and that was all, but she understood it completely. She reached up and pressed her hand briefly against his chest, felt his heartbeat under her palm, steadier than it should have been, steadier than she felt. "I trust you," she said. "Go. Do what you need to do. Come back." He covered her hand with his, held it there for a moment. "I will come back," he said. "Promise me." "I promise you," he said. And it was the most unguarded she had ever heard him. No architecture, no control, just a man making a promise to a woman he intended to keep it for. Taehyun drove her to the safe house in Hanam at 9. Small and clean. 3 locks on the door. A window over the city. She sat by the window with her father's photograph, the little girl in the kitchen, the hand on the shoulder, and watched Seoul spread out below her in the dark, enormous and glittering and holding every secret she was still in the middle of uncovering. Her phone rang at midnight. She picked up before the second ring. "I'm fine," Joon-ho said. "The house is secure. Lee sent men tonight. They've been handled. No one was hurt." She closed her eyes, let out the breath she'd been holding since 9 o'clock. "The expanded warrant is filed," he said. "Yoon's team is moving. Lee's position gets worse every hour now." "And you," she said. "How are you?" A pause. A real one. "Better," he said, "now that I can hear your voice." She pressed her hand to the window glass. Cold. The city below her moved and breathed and went on. "Joon-ho," she said, when this is over," he said, "I will take you to the restaurant, and you will make those biscuits, and we will figure out the rest." She laughed, quiet and real and full of everything the last 6 weeks had put in her. "Okay," she said. "Deal." They stayed on the line a little longer without saying much, just the sound of each other breathing in separate parts of the same city, which was its own kind of closeness. When she finally set the phone down, she sat for a long time in the dark. At 3 a.m. her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message. 4 words. "Your father didn't die." She stared at the screen. Read it again. Set the phone down. Picked it up. Read it a third time. Her father's cardiac event had been confirmed by 3 physicians. She had read the report. She had stood in his restaurant and felt the absence of him and called it grief and meant it. 4 words. The city below her did not pause. The photograph sat on the windowsill, the little girl still grinning, the father's hand still warm on her shoulder. A man she had mourned, a man she was only beginning to understand, a man who had written her name in his last note like a compass pointing home. Ava Brooks sat in a safe house in a city she had not planned to stay in a life she had not chosen and had built anyway, in love with a man she had married for the wrong reasons and was staying for the right ones. And her father, it turned out, was alive. And somewhere in Seoul tonight, someone had decided it was time she knew. If you thought this was the end, it's only the beginning. Ava just found out her father might still be alive, and in a city full of secrets, that truth could destroy everything she's built, including the one person she's finally started to trust. Part 2 is where everything changes. More danger, more betrayal, and a truth that refuses to stay buried. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.